In a land far, far away, there was once a very rich merchant who lived with his 3 beautiful daughters. His 2 older daughters were very proud, arrogant and had absolutely no respect for anyone, especially the poor. They loved to shop and look pretty all the time and made sure they got all the best fashionable clothes in town before anyone else could. Oh, how they loved to party. Those 2 never missed out on anything fun. The merchant's youngest daughter, Beauty, was the prettiest of them all. But she was very humble and very kind to everyone, unlike her sisters. She loved to read almost anything she could lay her hands on. Beauty was loved by everyone who knew her. One day, an unfortunate incident happened to the family. The ship with a merchant's goods for trade got lost at sea. He had invested all his money on those merchandise. Due to this, he immediately became as poor as you could ever imagine. He had to sell everything he owned for his family to survive. He sent his servants away and sold his big house. Now, the only thing he had left was a tiny cottage on the outskirts of their town. He had to move in with his 3 daughters. There were no servants to do anything at all. So, the 3 girls had to learn to cook, clean, farm and do almost everything all by themselves. Initially, Beauty struggled. But with time, she mastered the art of managing the home. Her sisters never helped out. They spent their time still trying to look pretty in the old fashionable clothes they owned. All they did best was to complain about their new life and accuse their father of irresponsibility. After 9 months of hardship, the merchant finally received word that the ship with his merchandise had been found. Immediately this news came, he set out to retrieve his goods. Before he left, he asked his daughters what he could get for them as gifts on his way back. His 2 older daughters asked for the most expensive clothes and shoes in vogue. But Beauty only asked for a rose. She got insulted by her sisters for choosing a common rose out of all the beautiful things she could ever wish for. But her father was determined to do as she pleased. A few days later, Beauty's father had to return home disappointed. He could not retrieve his merchandise because they could not be found on the ship. On his way back, one night, he realized he had forgotten all about Beauty's rose. He could not bear the thought of disappointing her. Just before he could think of what to do, a heavy storm began. The merchant was helpless and all wet. He looked beyond the woods and saw a bright light at a distance. He got closer and found a beautiful building, just like a palace. The main gates were wide opened and so the merchant proceeded to knock on the door. He patiently waited for the door to be answered but there was no response, so he entered and called out for assistance. Again, no one answered his call. He then found the fireplace and kept himself warm and dry, as he was all soaked by the rain. Upon entering a large hall, he came across a dining table with lots of food, almost as if there was going to be a feast. The merchant still waited for some time, until it struck 11, but there was still no sight of any human. At this point, he was so hungry that he could not wait anymore. He served himself a little portion and had a few glasses of wine. After this, he went out of the hall, and crossed through several grand chambers with magnificent furniture, until he found a bedroom. It was past midnight and he was extremely exhausted. He shut the door and fell fast asleep. The next morning around 10 a.m., the merchant woke up and got ready to leave. He returned to the dining hall, hoping to see someone, but was surprised to find another table with the best breakfast anyone could ever imagine. He found it weird and decided to leave. On his way out, he saw a rose garden and decided to pick one for his daughter, Beauty. Before he could leave, he heard giant footsteps come up from behind him. It was as if there was an earth tremor. Suddenly, he heard a loud roar and felt heavy hands touch him. He spun around and saw a monstrous being. It seemed like a beast. The beast roared at Beauty's father and threatened to kill him. He accused him of stealing his precious roses after he had been warmly welcomed into the palace. Beauty's father apologized and pleaded with the beast to spare his life. He told him he had no intention of being ungrateful. The rose was a gift he wanted for one of his daughters. Immediately, the beast calmed down and told the merchant he was only going to forgive him on condition that one of his daughters willingly come to stay with the beast at the palace. Otherwise, in a month's time, the merchant would have to come back for his punishment. When the merchant returned home, Beauty noticed his worry and spoke to him about it, but he assured her everything was okay. This went on for a while until one day, he couldn't hide his emotions anymore. He narrated his ordeal to his daughters. Beauty's sisters insulted her and blamed her for putting their father through such a horrible situation, all for Rose. Beauty felt bad about what her father had gone through and decided to go over to the Beast's palace to save her father's life. He refused because he was not ready to sacrifice any of his daughters. He loved them all so much. Beauty kept insisting to the point that her father had to give in to her request. He only hoped that the Beast would have a change of heart and let him go with his daughter unpunished. So, a week after his return home, Beauty and her father left for the Beast's palace. At the palace, the Beast met Beauty and commended her father for keeping his word. He immediately asked her father to leave and never return. Beauty was scared because she had never seen anything like the Beast. She firmly believed the Beast was going to eat her alive. However, she thought of making her last moments memorable by exploring the magnificent palace. In no time, she had found the Beast's library. Ever since, she spent her entire day in the library reading almost all the books on every shelf. Beauty and the Beast hardly spent time together because he hardly came out of his room except for when he had to have his meals. One night, they had dinner together and for the first time, the Beast spoke to her. He asked her how her day had been. Soon, they began having conversations at dinner. And suddenly, Beauty and the Beast started spending a lot of time together after dinner every night. They became very good friends and grew very fond of each other. On one of the nights together, the Beast took Beauty to a part of the palace she had never been to. He told her he had specially prepared that place for her. It was a beautiful bedroom, with lovely clothes and shoes for Beauty. There were lots of shelves with books she had never read. Beauty was amazed. She loved her new room so much. Beauty was a sight to behold in her new clothes. She wore her hair differently. Her transformation was out of this world. The Beast was always awed by her appearance every time he saw her. As they had dinner one night, the Beast asked Beauty to marry him. She was surprised because she never expected that. Though she cared so much about the Beast, she couldn't think of getting married to him. They had become very good friends. In fact, they were the best of friends. Beauty was scared of rejecting him for she did not know what his reaction would be. But, she was a very honest person. She politely told him how much she cared for him as a best friend. However, she wasn't sure about being his wife. The Beast understood her perfectly, though he never stopped asking this question each night. Every time he asked her, she politely declined. After 3 months, he finally gave up and asked her if there was anything he could do to make her happy. All she wished for was to know how her father and sisters were faring. She pleaded with him to allow her visit her family for a short while. The Beast was reluctant to let Beauty go. At the same time, he wanted to see her happy. He gave her a magic mirror to see her family and a magic ring that could take her anywhere she wanted to go. But she had to promise him that she was not going to be away for more than a week. Beauty agreed, and through the mirror she saw that her father was very sick and there was no one caring for him. This was because her sisters had gotten married. Immediately, Beauty used the ring just as the Beast had instructed, and in a fraction of a second, she was back home with her father. As soon as the merchant saw her, he became so cheerful and looked as healthy as ever. He told her he had fallen sick out of worry, but seeing her alive and looking more beautiful as ever just revived him. He told her about her sisters who happened to not be in happy marriages. They had married arrogant rich men who cared about no one, including their wives. He knew his daughters married them because they were fed up with the hard life. Few days later, Beauty's sisters heard of her arrival and came running to see what had become of her. They were filled with rage upon seeing her because they expected to find her in a terrible condition. Meanwhile, all Beauty did was to speak endlessly of her friendship with the Beast and how kind he had been to her. This got her sisters more infuriated. They devised a plan to make the Beast hate her by not allowing her to leave at the time she was supposed to. They became extremely kind to her the entire duration of her stay. It was so hard to believe. Finally, it was time for Beauty to go back to the palace. Her sisters pretended to cry so hard that she had to promise to stay. That night, she started worrying about the Beast and how she had broken her promise to him. After another full week with her family, Beauty had a dream about the Beast. He looked so sick that he could die at any moment. She woke up and checked on him through her magic mirror. There he was, lying down on his bed, looking so weak and sad. Immediately, she used her ring and got back to the palace. When the beast saw her, he felt sad that she had broken her promise and had forgotten all about him. He told her he had starved himself because he thought he had lost her forever. He was glad to have seen her beautiful face before giving up the ghost. She pleaded with him to stay alive to be her husband, for she thought she only loved him as her friend, but, seeing him in that state, she was convinced she couldn't live without him. Beauty had not ended her words when the beast, out of nowhere, disappeared, and what stood before her was a very handsome prince. The young prince then recounted how an enchantress had cursed him due to his bad temper. The enchantress had turned him into a beast, and everything and everyone around had become lifeless. The only way the curse could be broken was for someone to genuinely love him for who he was. He had never imagined becoming human again, because who would love a beast? But Beauty made this possible. He was extremely grateful. 3 days later, Beauty and the Beast, now transformed into a young and handsome prince, had the most beautiful royal wedding ever. All Beauty's family and friends back home were invited and made merry with the new couple. Beauty was crowned a queen, and the two lived happily ever after.